to talk about this idea of leaps of faith, and what sort of prompted me to choose this topic is that we get a lot of calls that go like, well, the caller will call in and say, hey, can you prove that God doesn't exist? And we have to say, no, we can't prove that.
Well, it depends on how you define God.
That's right. It depends a lot on how you define that. And so the caller will then say, well, Christianity must be true, right? So there's this huge gap, though, between the existence of some God, that's sort of ill-defined, and the existence of a Christian God. And here is how many leaps of faith does it take to get from atheism or no beliefs to whatever your belief is, right?
One, as long as it's a really
big one, right? So the point of the show today is to break down all this really sort of big leap of faith to Christianity or deism or some of these other beliefs, and look at how many leaps you really have to make in order to get there. This idea of leap is hard, and it can be defined as a belief in something without evidence or in spite of evidence to the contrary. So a leap is really sort of a guess, right? You're sort of believing something that you don't have any evidence for. The likelihood of it being correct, because it's a guess, would be very small, right? And when you start making multiple leaps, the likelihood gets multiplied, right? This very small number gets multiplied by a very small number. It becomes an even smaller number, right? So the more leaps of faith you make, the less likely the thing is to be true. And I count 30 leaps of faith from atheism to Christianity. So the likelihood of it being true is, all things being equal, is basically nothing, right, as far as I'm concerned, right? So even if we accept the one leap of faith that is that God exists, it's still very, very unlikely that Christianity exists. So it's like
that's a huge leap from the get-go.
Right.
I mean, you're
yeah.
going to kind of go through your list of them.
We're going to go through the list.
But the very first one is the one you just mentioned,
right.
that some God exists. Mm-hmm. And I would say, just from the outset, that particular leap is at least as fanciful as most of the other ones combined. Because, for many reasons. What is your justification, or what is the, I guess, rationalization? What path is it that you would have to take in order to kind of back up your leap of faith? I mean, I realize that faith, you don't need any backing for it, and that's its, I guess, one saving grace is you don't have to explain why you're believing nonsense. But as far as how big of a leap it is,
sure,
usually there's some excuse.
Yeah. So the existence of a God is certainly one thing. I mean, when you start talking about God with an atheist, that's probably the first thing that the atheist is going to bring up, right? Because it's sort of the first step in doing this, right? And we're not even convinced that that's even a very sound jump, right? And we bring this topic up all the time, right? In the absence of evidence for something, you're more conservative. The more conservative thing is to not believe it, not buy into it, right? Not believe the Nigerian scam that came in your email, right? Because you don't have any evidence that it's true. These sorts of things. It's best to be conservative. So this is where we get off the train of these beliefs. So these 30 guesses that I claim, maybe more than 30. I mean, you probably can think of a few more that need to be made here. These 30 leaps of faith are like making 30 wild guesses in a row and arriving at the truth. It's like winning a lottery that has 30 balls, right? It's like, anyway. So we've already talked about the first one, is there exists a God. And then the next one I'd like to hit is there exists only one God. And that's sort of a leap of faith, is that we really are talking about monotheism. There's only one God, but many belief systems like Hinduism and such have multiple gods. They have multiple pantheons. And
when we move from polytheism to monotheism, the traits of these many gods get kind of summed up in the one, and he becomes internally conflicted.
Right. So the multiple gods gives you kind of a convenient out for why things don't work out in real life, right?
Yeah.
Something screws up, well, one God was fighting against the other,
yeah.
right? Or it was a tug of war, and God A won and God B didn't win, or whatever. Right? You can always have a
They're
rationalization.
Trying to sabotage each other, or
right.
bickering over territory.
Right. It's more like I like the Greek gods because they're kind of like a soap opera.
Yeah, you got to. Well, if you got to.
Leap number 3: God is intelligent. So we presume that God's pretty smart, right? They're just kind of tied up in this notion of God. I guess a lot of these first ones are kind of pinning down the nature of God. You could have a stupid God, right? Why not? So this is one of the assumptions behind the ID movement, and so on. So were you going to say?
So you're not saying that your number 3 there, where it says God is intelligent. The fact that God, as you know, we've already granted in the first one, whatever, that some God exists, and inherent in the definition is some level of intelligence. What you're talking about for number 3 is a sufficient level of intelligence, a wisdom, or
Maybe so. Maybe you know,
smarter than us.
Smarter than us. We get problems with the Bible, right? Of all the different mistakes that God's made along the way. So, like, you know, like Adam and Eve falling.
I don't know, having a creation, having it go wrong, starting over, having it go wrong, starting over, having it go wrong.
Starting over.
Yeah.
Confusing
the Bible is an anthology of the failures of Jehovah to get anything at all right.
So leap number 4, the God is all-powerful and almighty. So this assumption of omnipotence. And this gets into a host of other problems. There's a lot of reasons why you shouldn't believe this, right? There's a whole lot of problems. There's this free will problem. If humans have free will, then effectively humans have power that God doesn't have, right? If you can make a decision, God doesn't have the power to force you not to make that decision. Right?
Yeah, except that the Bible specifically talks about God circumventing people's free will. Pharaoh wanted to let the Egyptians go, but God hardened his heart and prevented him from doing that. The bigger thing, though, is that omnipotence isn't actually mentioned in the Bible at all.
Oh, God is self-creating. So you have this problem of, well, you're explaining the universe by the existence of a God. God created the universe, so therefore the universe doesn't have to be self-creating, but you've just moved the problem back. The God has to be self-creating, or God has to have come from a long line of whatever, or he has to exist outside of time, or some magic special pleading. Oh, Matt's looking this thing up. 19:6.
Yeah, it doesn't say anything like what you
Okay,
said.
well, maybe I wrote
this term omnipotence has no meaning.
Right.
Is useless as a description. And most people, when they would say, you know, God Almighty or an omnipotent God, they're not talking about a God that can in fact do everything, including the logically impossible. They're just talking about a being that is so vastly superior in power and capabilities to us that it might as well be omnipotence. And that I still think there's problems with.
Oh yeah, but to solve this infinite regress problem, right? Of who created your God? Or
except self-creating is a bad phrase.
Is it?
Yeah, because most Christians
exists outside of time and in nebulous, you know.
Yeah. Eternal.
Eternal.
There's a difference between self-creating and eternal. So most of them would make that a distinction too.
Okay.
I'm just playing Jesus' advocate.
Yeah, Jesus' advocate, right? So, you know, if X
but
exists,
still, the timeless, the infinite existence is a problem.
It's a problem. It's a leap of faith, absolutely. That God decided to create the universe is number 6. So there's this notion of a conscious decision to do something, and this is completely at odds with the idea of God being perfect, right? If God is perfect and he is all-powerful, then the universe is perfect, right? So there's no need to change anything. Right? Right?
No, I agree with you where I thought you were going.
Either it's perfect after, or it was perfect before, but it can't be both.
The idea is that God as perfection is inherent and complete without any need to create the universe.
Right.
Nothing to do with whether the universe is perfect, though.
Well, right. So this they're related, right? So number 7, indeed create the universe, being all powerful. Which gets into the whole problem of, well, maybe the universe was self-creating, or maybe some other thing created it, or maybe it exists independently of time, just like God does.
Yeah, that's an important distinction. And when you're talking about the various path that you have to take, one is that you can believe there's a God, and that there's only one God, and that he's intelligent and extremely powerful, and wanted to create the universe. But in fact, the universe was not created by this God. That we're talking about two completely separate things that could be coexistent. So.
Right. So let me hit a few more, and we'll take a few callers after a bit. I want to get to the point where we're talking about deism. So what I'm trying to do with these first few is kind of narrow things down to where we get to a set of beliefs that's pretty close to what many of the founding fathers had, and then as part of the way of doing that is will depart from that and go down all the way to Christianity, which is quite a long distance from there. So the rest of these, or a handful of these, are relatively fast. God, number 8, God cares about His creation. So it's like Pinocchio's creator, Geppetto, caring a lot about his little creation and how it turns out, and that the universe wasn't created as a mistake, right? So that's what number 8 implies.
But that is inconsistent with deism.
Okay, yes, you're some forms of deism.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. Thomas Paine wouldn't buy that. Number 9, humans are somehow special in the creation above all other things. Which, given our knowledge about the universe, how old it is and how big it is, it's hard to imagine that we're the purpose of its creation, given that, we're so insignificant. I mean, that's one of the things you learn when you look at cosmology is just how insignificant we are in the grand scheme of things. Number 10, that humans have a soul that survives after death. And we've talked we've done whole shows on souls, and the notion of ensoulment and when that happens and who does that, and all this tinkering we're doing with stem cells and cloning and all that begs a lot of questions of who's really creating souls and whether they even exist or not. We haven't found one yet, so don't have any evidence of that, so that's a big leap. Number 11, God wants humans to behave morally, and apparently that God cares about your sex life. Number 12, the God is omniscient, and so He knows whether you've been naughty or nice, right? He can look in on you and
Sure, we're talking about God?
We're talking about God, right?
Okay.
Well, number 13, we start departing from Santa Claus here. The God will reward and punish the soul in the afterlife. Well,
Yeah.
Santa Claus is, punishing
In this life.
the kid in this life with goodies and lumps of coal or something. So, and somehow the soul feels pain without a body, right?
Well, as long as you're starting to talk magic, you might as well go that extra step. And
Right. So there's no evidence that there's a soul that lives out in the afterlife. All the evidence is that when your body dies, you die. That's the end of it, and that's what atheists believe, or what our position is. So the next one, before we get to the sort of the demarcation point for deism, is God is benevolent. Aside from judgment, so you can do this lots of different ways. You can say that God as well slightly favors humanity and looking out for humanity, or many religions, I think even Christianity goes and says, well, God is omnibenevolent, right? He is the essence of good, the essence of benevolence, and this brings, of course, the problem of evil, right? We now have omniscience, omnipotence, and benevolence, right? Which raises the question of, well, if there's evil, if there's bad things that happen in the world, how can this be, right? If a God is so powerful and He wants this to happen and He knows it's going to happen, why isn't He preventing it, right? Why are there tsunamis? Why are there people dying in mining disasters and so on? So for me, the omnibenevolence is the least believable of the three omnis, right? Every being acts in their own self-interest unless they've had their power removed from them or they're being sabotaged somehow, right? I don't know of any being that's sentient that doesn't act in its own self-interest, right? That isn't corrupted or broken or whatever, right? And we're presuming a God here, right? That isn't sabotaged, isn't being controlled or whatever, right? Mm-hmm. So I claim that at this point we are to the point where we're pretty close to the beliefs of deisms, or deists, who are kind of this sort of absentee landlord, that there is this notion of an afterlife and reward and punishment, but that God is kind of letting things go on its own way. And so let me go on. Number 15, leaps of faith. We're trying to make our leaps of faith to Christianity. We've gone 14 leaps so far. I think you could have gone other directions on all of these and been at least equally likely to go those ways. So number 15, that God made humans in His own image. So there's this idea of God as an old man in the sky, which leads to a lot of sexism, I think, because we got a male-dominated thing. Men get to have power over the women and all that. So that's part of Christianity, definitely. It's egocentric. We want God to look like us, right? So we make gods that supposedly created us in our. Number 16, that God interacts with humans. So you could have a God that doesn't give a hoot about humans, right, and doesn't interact with us, even if he cares about us, right? So that's really a separate issue. Number 17, God wants people to believe in him. So that we have this problem. One of the things I've brought up on one of the shows is we have people who believe in these religions end up causing harm to others, right? We have people who believe in creationism and intelligent design sabotaging the education of other people. We have people who believe in embryos having souls sabotaging embryos that would otherwise be discarded, used for stem cell research. Right. We have all these things, right? And so we have, but yet we have this God that supposedly wants people to believe in him, right? So you actually have evil being created by God's wish of people to believe in him, right? And this is what I call the problem of evil belief. It's very closely related to the problem of evil. If God was benevolent, he would just show himself and say, "Hi-ho, here I am." You don't need to have this belief, right? You can, you can get suspend with that, right? But if you have this God that wants people to believe in him, then and he's hiding, right? Then you got a problem.
And by the way, if you're sitting out,
that's great, Matt. That's great. So that more or less hits number 18, which is that God wants to hide because he values faith. And it's kind of a circular thing, right? You got to believe in something. Yeah.
I'm gonna stay hidden. I'm a prankster God.
Right.
To quote Bill Hicks there.
Yeah, you have to believe in it because it wants to hide because it wants you to believe in it.
Well, some of these people who are willing to make these kind of
it's just confusing to me.
The people who are willing to make a lot of these mental gymnastic moves are the same ones who are saying that God or Satan, perhaps, we haven't figured out which one, went and buried all these fossils to confuse us and make us not believe evolution. But it's if you're going to have that kind of prankster God mentality, to paraphrase Bill Hicks, I don't know what to tell you.
Well, Paul says that God can't lie, so it can't have been God, right?
Well, he says he can't lie, but obviously Paul didn't read the Old Testament.
Yeah.
So
Paul thinks. God performs. Number 19. God performs miracles, presumably to bolster faith, right? So, but nothing ever is really big, or nothing ever is repeatable.
Well, he used to perform big miracles, but he's getting old.
Little parlor tricks. I don't know what he's doing yet.
He's like he's like the old stage magician who's now like pulling quarters out of kids' ears.
Right. So number 20, God had a hand in writing the Bible. So right around in here, we're kind of getting into a lot of these are Jewish beliefs, and we're sort of slithering off over to Christianity. So God had a hand in writing the Bible. Number 21, the Old Testament Bible is true. But just because something's written down doesn't mean anything, right? Harry Potter is written down, right? We can't, we don't have people running around saying that's true, right? So writing something down sort of makes it coherent, makes it whole, makes it, whatever, makes it a unified thing. But that's sort of what I'm fighting against here, is picking things apart. Number 22. Especially the Old Testament part of the Bible about Adam and Eve and original sin. And this is a necessary part of the Christian church because they want to play mind games with you. They want to put this guilt trip on you so you'll donate money, so you'll pay attention to them, so you'll listen to the church and obey the church, right, to get you out of this original sin problem, right? And we've done whole shows on that of, how can you be punished for what somebody else did? And gosh, if God, weren't such a screw up, maybe he would have just killed off Adam and Eve after doing that and made a more perfect man and woman.
Yeah.
And we wouldn't have all these problems, right?
And of course, there's a huge question of if that was the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, how the hell were they supposed to know that it was wrong to eat from it in the first place?
Right, it's a catch-22.
I mean, you can say, well, God told them, yes, but they have no concept of this, is the point.
Right.
I mean, you create this kind of mythology that is so, grand and all-encompassing, and then you just kind of shrug off all the little problems that have created, And I'm not speaking to everybody. I realize there's a lot of liberal and moderate Christians who disregard all that as just, oh, that's just metaphor and Jewish history and blah blah blah. All right, great, congratulations. You're not buying into this really stupid nonsense. You're just buying into some of the stupid nonsense. You're trusting in this, oh, it's all about loving your neighbor and turning the other cheek, and not worrying at all about how are you drawing the line between which verses count and which ones don't. I mean, Thomas Jefferson goes through and redacts his Bible, removing all the claims of divinity and supernatural powers, and basically just leaves the message of Jesus. And good for him. Jefferson was brilliant, but I don't think he went far enough. I think when you actually look at get a red letter Bible and just read the words of Jesus, ignore everything else, and come tell me how it is what is the key to salvation, and how does that compare to the doctrine that you were taught your whole life in whatever church you happen to be in? What did Jesus actually say about it according to your Bible? And then you can look
ahead of us here, but go ahead.
Okay, I'll come back. But you can look at those words and ask, is this really good advice? Is this something that we should consider divine? And then once you've got those questions in your head, think about, how the hell do you know that those are words that anybody actually spoke ever? Ever. What reason do you have to believe that this book's a reliable testimony as to what somebody said? And especially when what he's saying is so asinine and bad advice. I mean,
It's certainly not the greatest thing in the world. Well, you talk about people who don't necessarily buy into this Adam and Eve thing, but if you don't have a fall of man, the whole reason for Jesus' existence and the whole reason for Christianity goes out the window.
Yeah, if you're not born corrupt, then this whole idea, by the way, this was a brilliant move in theology, was to have God keep screwing up, and finally he comes up with the ultimate solution, which is to sacrifice himself to himself,
okay,
to create a loophole.
That's my last one. You're getting ahead of me here.
See,
you got that Jesus thing going. You're all wound up.
I got the Jesus going. By the way, for those who are wondering
in fact, that's the next one. God made a rule that he needed to blood sacrifice to himself to somehow fix that sin. Right?
See, I wasn't ahead of you.
There's got to be a blood sacrifice, but who made that rule? Who made that rule? What sense does that make? Why didn't he just get rid of the rule if he's all powerful? He's not all powerful, apparently.
If I'm making the rules, I don't need to make a loophole. I changed the rule. I mean, this is infinite wisdom that qualifies your book. You explain it.
Okay. So God made the rule. That's number 23. Number 24, now we're getting into Jesus land. God created a half-breed child. Right? Half-breed. He's half human, half God, just like the sons of God who came down and interbreed with the human women folk to become the heroes of old.
The child of a ghost and a virgin.
And it's just, isn't it kind of a coincidence that just around the time that Judaism and the Greek mythology kind of come together in the melting pot of Rome, you get the Greek gods who go off and sire children with mortals, that whole concept appearing in Christianity. Isn't that just a funny coincidence? So we got the number 25, the purpose of the half-breed child was to be tortured and killed as a means of fixing the sin, right?
Yeah. Not only did he go and create a loophole, but he created a particularly vicious one.
Right, torture and killing, just to get your attention, I guess.
A lot of people would play this up as well. God's got an important message for you. I can think of much better ways to deliver a message. I certainly wouldn't write it down and communicate to people in languages that I know are going to die off and be mistranslated over the years. But I still understand this. Oh, by the way, I'm going to go down and a third of me, which is all of me, is going to take human form and be tortured and bloodied in order to make up for all the mistakes in the past. Thanks. Oh, in the future. I don't want to.
Because otherwise he couldn't feel pain, and he wouldn't be omnipotent.
I don't want to trample all over your.
It's all
dogma,
quite confusing. Okay.
So what's the next leap?
And we're kind of related to this. Is you might as well blame the Jews for this while you're at it, right?
I got email that I don't blame the Jews enough, but we won't go there.
Well, there are lots of Jewish kooks as well, so I think that was the point that he was making. Anyway, Number 26, this half-breed named Jesus could perform miracles. Okay, although even in the Bible, even in the New Testament, his mother was surprised by the miracles. And I'd say one of the biggest miracles was his missing 30 years. Right?
Yeah.
The last few leaps of faith. Leap of faith number 27, after Jesus' death, he rose again and appeared to his followers. Right, and we got problems there because we got 4 conflicting versions of that in the Gospels.
Yeah, you got problems way before then, though. I mean,
Yeah,
you've got
Go ahead.
Luke putting the birth of Jesus around the time of Quirinius, and then Matthew's putting it at the time of Herod, and there's a decade of difference between those two.
The multiple bloodlines leading up to Jesus.
Yeah, different
Who presumably didn't even
genealogies.
have a bloodline from.
You know, basically what you've got in the New Testament is a handful of books that at best estimate were written decades, several decades at least, after the events that they're supposed to tell about. You have no contemporary independent confirmation outside of the New Testament.
You don't know who wrote the New Testament.
You don't know who the authors are, at least for the Gospels and stuff. We have, you know, Paul and others on good authority. But so you have these stories about miracles for which you have no corroboration. You have errors in internal conflict over, and yet you want so desperately to believe that you're willing to overlook all of that and say, yep, these are the words of Jesus. This is the story of his life, and these are the things that he said. If anybody else presented anything similar to this, with the same timelines, the same internal consistencies, everybody, and they brought it up right now, and said this is the one true religion, everybody would laugh at them. And I don't mean that. I mean, I've been mean today to my Christian friends, and I don't mean to be mean. What I'm trying to do is that when we're talking about beliefs that are ridiculous, then that means they're deserving of ridicule. And I'm not ridiculing you. I'm ridiculing the belief. And that's a distinction that a lot of people just can't make. I'm not all right, hit them. Somebody's
Okay.
on the phone, but we're getting infos.
We invite callers. Number 8. Belief in the dead Jesus is the new and only route to eternal bliss in the afterlife. So they had to seal off this other leap of faith that got you to the fact that there's an afterlife and that God is, somehow controlling this to Jesus is the path. Jesus is the way there, and everybody else is going to go to hell, right? It's an exclusive club. You got to believe.
Especially the Catholics.
Are they going to hell? Or
If you ask the Protestants and the Calvinists.
Oh yeah, that's always funny to me is how the different sects think that the other sects are all going to go to hell. It's too funny.
Yeah.
But they're one big happy family when they're going after the gays or they're going after the atheists.
Oh yeah, as long as there's a bigger target,
Right.
Oh, we're buddies.
They're pretty good.
Catholics and Protestants.
They're pretty good at ganging up on somebody else when the time comes.
As soon as there's nobody.
Okay. So number 29, God and Jesus and this magical thing called the Holy Spirit are all the one and the same. This is the whole Trinity idea.
Which was invented in 325 AD at the Council of Nicaea.
Okay.
Pretty much out of whole cloth. I'm down on Zeitgeist for making up conspiracy crap, but that one kind of holds. There's not much evidence that any of the early Christians had any notion at all of the Trinity.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, people should be aware that Christianity and all these beliefs have changed dramatically over time, right? And for example, this covenant of marriage didn't used to be the church didn't used to have anything to do with it until 1263 or somewhere around there. It's like the whole half of the existence of the Catholic Church, of the Christian Church. They didn't care very much about marriage, or they actually warned against it in many cases, right?
Paul did.
Because loving a woman meant that you couldn't love God as much, right? It was a competition, right? And they thought it was better to love God. So yeah, Christianity has changed many times over the years, and it's still evolving.
You're talking about a period of time.
Okay, number 30, Jesus will appear again at the end of the world and end the world as we know it. So the whole end times thing is really very much a Christian thing. So this causes Christians to want to go out and potentially destroy civilization, or they welcome that, they look forward to that for an extra special trip to heaven. I think of this whole end times thing as snuff porn. You're getting off on the suffering of other people,
Yeah.
and I don't think very highly of it. So we have 30 leaps of faith, I think, and I think there are really more here than the 30 identified. So, you know, how likely is Christianity to be true? Not very likely. This is insane. So we invite callers to call in and tell me I'm wrong here, or hey, this little leap of faith makes a lot